You know, I found that many of your ideas and presentations were very challenging and dangerous to the limits that I felt on my mind, but I don't feel especially terrified sitting across from you talking with you. I don't feel like you're any danger to me.
No, I'm a nice man. That's part of the strategy. I'm the doorkeeper to deep, dark water.
Okay, now I will talk a little bit about what I've learned from psychedelics. I feel self-conscious doing it, but on the other hand, wouldn't it be stupid for me to talk about what you've learned from psychedelics? That would add presumption to the sins already arrayed here. There are different models about what the psychedelic experience is. Here's a couple. Building on Western psychotherapy as elaborated by Freud and Jung, one view of what psychedelics are is it's the part of your mind that you'd rather not do business with. It's the memories of childhood neglect or abuse. It's repressed kinky fantasies. It's, in other words, the Freudian idea of the unconscious, that somehow these are drugs which dissolve the boundary between conscious and unconscious mind, and then you can do accelerated psychotherapy because resistances have been pharmacologically overcome. That's one model. It's good as far as it goes. It just doesn't go far enough. Then there's another model, which I would call the traditional or shamanic model. And it says the cosmos is a series of levels, and these levels are connected by vertical routes of access, which can be thought of as simply flights through space, or magical trees, or magical ladders. Anyway, there's an image of ascent. And ordinary people exist on only one of these levels. But a shaman is not an ordinary person. A shaman is a superhuman person who has the power of animal allies behind them, and they can go up and down in these elevators that move between levels, and they can therefore recover lost souls, see social hanky-panky, theft and adultery, see the causes behind that, see the causes behind disease, so forth and so on. That would be the traditional one. What I have concluded after 25 years of fiddling with this is that both of those ideas have a certain something to recommend them, but that they don't go far enough, and that we get more to the meat of this if we leave off psychological, the first explanation, or sociological, the second explanation, and actually go for something a little more formal, to wit, a mathematical model of what shamanism is. And what I mean by that is, let's think about what shamans do. They cure disease, and another way of putting that is they have a remarkable facility for choosing patients who will recover. They predict weather, they're very important. They tell where game has gone, the movement of game, and they seem to have an paranormal ability to look into questions, as I mentioned, who's sleeping with who stole the chicken, social transgressions are an open book to them. Well, thinking about this from a mathematician's point of view, an all-encompassing explanation that would explain how all these magical feats are done is simply to suppose that the shaman is somehow able to project his consciousness, his or her consciousness, into a higher dimension not metaphorically, as in Sylvester Stallone has many dimensions, not metaphorically, but literally, as in 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, and 4. Because if you could move into the 4th dimension, the dimension orthogonal to Newtonian space-time, seeing what the weather is going to be next week is as easy as seeing what the weather is now. Seeing where the game went is as easy as seeing where the game are. Knowing who stole the chicken is simply defined by looking to see who stole the chicken. And I have noticed that all of biology, not simply shamanism within the context of human society, but all of biology is, in a sense, a conquest of dimensionality. That as we ascend the phylogeny of organic life, what animals are a strategy for conquering space-time. And complex animals do it better than simpler animals. And we do it better than any complex animal. And we 20th century people do it better than any people in any previous century, because we can bind data in so many ways that they couldn't, electronically, on film, on tape, so forth and so on. So the progress of organic life is deeper and deeper into dimensional conquest. Well, from that point of view, then, the shaman begin to look like the advance guard of a new kind of human being. A human being that is as advanced over where we are as we are advanced over people 1 million years ago, because we have very elaborate strategies for coding the past. It's a dimensional conquest. So that's part of what I've learned about psychedelics. And I could have left it there, but I never do. I always want to bring more in under the umbrella of whatever metaphor it is that's being pushed. And what I have discerned is that time is actually speeding up. That the universe is not what physics tells us it is. Physics tells us that the universe is a physical system, an entropic system that was born in immense energy and chaos and will run down with a bang, with a whimper, not a bang, run down into heat, entropy, and dissipation. The psychedelic data on this is completely different. The psychedelic data says what that model left out was biology and mind. Now, biology, you might imagine, is a fairly ephemeral, recent, fragile phenomenon. It is not. The average star in this galaxy gutters out after about 700 million years. Not our star. We happen to have the good fortune to be around a very stable, slow-burning star. But there has been biology on this planet at least 2 billion years. 3 times the average life of a star. So biology is not some Johnny-come-lately epiphenomena. Biology is a phenomenon more persistent than the life of the stars themselves. And biology is not a static thing. A star evolving now is not greatly different from a star evolving 1 billion years ago. Biology doesn't work that way. Biology constantly changes the context in which evolution occurs. The way I have downloaded this into a phrase is the universe is, the biological universe at least, is a novelty-conserving engine. Upon simple molecules are built complex molecules. Upon complex molecules are built complex polymers. Upon complex polymers comes DNA. Out of DNA comes the whole machinery of the cell. Out of cells comes simple aggregate colony animals like Hydra and that sort of thing. Out of that, true animals. Out of that, ever more complex animals, organs of locomotion, organs of sight, organs of smell, complex mental machinery for the coordinating of data in time and space. This is the whole story of the advancement of life. And in our species, it reaches its culmination and it crosses over into a new domain where change no longer occurs in the atomic and biological machinery of existence. It begins to take place in this world which we call mental. It's called epigenetic change, change which cannot be traced back to mutation of the arrangements of molecules inside long-chain polymers, but change taking place in syntactical structures that are linguistically based. And people have probably been using language with considerable facility for probably 50,000 years, possibly more. In our own time, we have created ever more elaborate languages, ever more elaborate technologies for transforming, storing, and retrieving language, so that we are actually on the brink, of being able to give every single one of you the complete cultural inventory, the complete database of human beings' experience on this planet. That's what these data highways and networks are all about. The nervous system is being hardwired. But what I wanted to draw your attention to about this is it is not only an advance deeper and deeper into novelty, but it's an advance in which each successive stage occurs more quickly than the stage which preceded it. So, once you get the Big Bang, then nothing much happens for a long, long time. There's plasma streaming through the universe. The universe is slowly cooling, but that's the most dramatic, complex process in the universe, this cooling. Then, after a certain point, more complex processes come in. Complexification begins to build, and as it builds, it begins to happen faster and faster and faster. And the great puzzle in the biological record is the suddenness of our own emergence, human emergence out of the primate line. It happened with enormous suddenness. Lumholtz calls it the most explosive reorganization of a major organ of a higher animal in the entire fossil record. And that's, a great embarrassment to the theory of evolution, because this is the organ which generated the theory of evolution. We're not talking an appendix or an eyebrow here. We're talking the very organ which generated it. I think that we have taken far too much responsibility for what is happening, and that what we took to be a staircase we were climbing is actually an up escalator. And if you will stop climbing, you will notice that it does not impede your upward progress, because the ground you're standing on is moving you toward the goal. And I think that this idea, which may be the proof that I'm bonkers, requires a fairly radical reorganization of consciousness, because what I'm saying is the universe was not born in a fiery explosion from which it has been being blasted outward ever since. The universe is not being pushed like that from behind. The universe is being pulled from the future toward a goal that is as inevitable as a marble reaching the bottom of a bowl when you release it up near the rim. You know, if you do that, the marble will roll down the side of the bowl, down, 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 and eventually it will come to rest in the lowest energy state, which is the bottom of the bowl. That's precisely my model of human history. And now, bear in mind what the competition is peddling. The competition is peddling the idea that the universe sprang from nothing in a single moment for no reason. Now, whatever you think about that, notice that it's the limit case for credulity. Do you understand what I mean? I mean, if you can believe that, it's hard for me to imagine what you would balk at. If we were to sit down and say, let's see who can think of the most unlikely thing that could possibly happen, I submit to you, nobody could top the Big Bang. It is the improbability of improbabilities. It is the mother of all improbabilities right there. So I'm suggesting something different. I'm suggesting that the universe is pulled toward a complex attractor that exists ahead of us in time, and that our ever-accelerating speed through the phenomenal world of connectivity and novelty is based on the fact that we are now very, very close to the attractor. All Western religions have insisted that God would come tangential to history, but they all lose their nerve when you ask when, which is the only interesting question about that hypothesis. I mean, if it's not now, then what the hell difference does it make? It's just pissing in the wind as far as I can see. I think that the very real social crisis that is upon us, the crisis of population, of resource depletion, of atmospheric degradation, of epidemic disease, all these crises indicate that we are now down to the short epochs of this process of universal ingression into novelty, and that in fact it makes no sense whatsoever to speak of a human future. There is no human future. It's inconceivable, given where we are today, that to speak of the human world 1,000 years from now, or 500 years from now. It is literally, it either doesn't exist, or it's beyond our power of imagining. It isn't simply going to be non-polluting cars and smaller hi-fi speakers. I mean, that's an idiot's notion.
Better pictures of today.
Yeah, clearer TV pictures. It isn't like that at all. I mentioned this morning, how when you look at only one line of technological development, automobiles or computers, it looks like you can rationally anticipate what's going to happen. But when you realize that there are thousands of these lines of development, all transforming themselves, all moving towards some kind of omega point, then you realize that we're in the grip of what I call a concrescence. And I maintain that you don't have to believe me on this. You can see it from here. You just have to climb a high hill. There's one. It's called psilocybin. There's one. It's called ayahuasca. The view from the tops of these hills is of the concrescence. It lies now closer to us than the Johnson administration, for God's sake, in time. And, I have an elaborate mathematical theory to back this up, which you should gratefully learn you are not going to be flayed with this afternoon, but I think it's going to become more and more important for people to delinearize their view of time. Decondition yourself from the lie of history. After all, if time were space, history would be a spider web. So bear that in mind.
I'm going to talk to Mr. Terence McKenna right now. Terence is an ethnobotanist. He's the author of Food of the Gods, True Hallucinations, and numerous other very informative books and articles. And he's been featured in many magazines such as Omni and Psychedelic Illuminations, many other books. Are you on the line there, Terence?
I'm hanging in.
All right.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm here. I'm up. I don't know how long we can do it with cellular from Hawaii, but I'm willing to give it a whirl.
Well, you sound good on this end.
Yeah. The phone line's much better than the last time we had you on the show. This is another time period where people haven't heard this information before, and I don't know if they realize how ancient this plant is, the marijuana cannabis plant. Could you give people a little background information on how old this plant is?
Well, probably this plant is as old as agriculture. In fact, probably much older, because it has so many uses, you know, as food, as fuel, as fiber, as animal fodder. It was really just there when we came out of the darkness of pre-civilization, and it grows very well across the Middle East, the kind of areas that human populations were migrating into. I think it's arguably one of the oldest cultivated plants.
Now, this plant's been used in many different ways down through the millenniums of time. What are some of the things that you found in your research that the plant's been used for?
Well, I'm particularly interested in the intoxication of it and how that's affected various cultures. And one of the interesting things about that is how recent smoking cannabis is. In the 19th century, people who were experimenting with cannabis for its psychological effects were eating it. As far as the other uses, you know, I think probably we find cordage and impressions of weavings on the sides of clay pots that go back nearly 7,000 years. And that cordage probably was hemp.
And that was Catalha
it's been used as a basis for material culture that long, and it's also been used as a basis for, you know, the imaginative and theatrical and fun side of things.
One of the things we learned from Lynn and Judy Osborne's book, Green Gold, The Tree of Life, Marijuana and Magic and Religion, is that the ancient sacred incense that was burned in all the temples of all religions was actually hashish, and that the Scythians, for instance, had felt tents that they built, and they would stick their head into it and breathe in the smoke or vapors from the hashish or cannabis buds.
Yes, that's in Herodotus.
Right.
And I talk about that in my book, Food of the Gods, as well. I think that's the earliest literary mention of cannabis. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. That's the earliest literary mention. But, as I say, the presence of cordage and weaving. In my book, I talk about how all the words associated with storytelling, like spinning a yarn, unraveling a tale, tying up loose ends, these are all words associated with weaving and spinning. And I think probably, you know, in the long hours of the Paleolithic, people made cordage and they wove, and they were high on cannabis, and they told stories. It helped them recite the database of the culture. And, of course, children were present, observing all this, learning the stories and the ways of the weavers.
Well, I think one of the interesting things I find about this plant is the way it opens up doors of communication amongst people.
Yes, it's a strong social glue, and the impact of this on a socially bound animal like ourselves is very hard to calculate. It seems to incline people more to an erotic, laid-back family style than a warring, hunting,
Well,
hello?
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say I'm a great enthusiast of mushrooms and their impact on prehistory, but I think when people moved out of Africa, the obvious substitute for the religious complex that had been established in Africa was cannabis. I mean, cannabis was worldwide, easy to grow, as I said, a food, a fuel, it inputted into material culture. It was like a new incarnation of the goddess to these people moving out of Africa and trying to cross the Anatolian plateau and enter India and so forth.
Well, and so it's obviously had some influence in cultures throughout time, and I'm looking at the political climate of today, and one of the premiums, or one of the gifts that we're giving away today is your talk from the Phoenix Bookstore call on true hallucinations.
Uh-huh.
And you said in that you happen to believe that if marijuana became legal, it would be a very big deal. And I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit in the political climate of today and in the global market where this plant is taking off as a resource for food and fiber and medicine, and yet it's still being stifled information-wise in this country.
Well, I think that's because we never, in the whole discussion about legalizing cannabis, have come to grips with what I think is the real issue, which is it does change people, and the way in which it changes them makes it hostile toward the values of industrial capitalism.
That's for sure.
And yet it provides a base for an economic recovery.
As a product itself, but as a habit,
yes,
it makes you very uninterested in the values and schedules and hierarchies of industrial society. So I've always felt that it was being suppressed with that fully in the mind of the suppressors, that this is very, very important, I think, to how society and social polity will develop in the future. The question being, will it be with or without an ambiance of cannabis? And I think cannabis, promotes Gaian values, feminine values, community values, and a hard look at the other set of values, unbridled materialism, that is being sold in the media marketplace.
That's right. And in this day and age when the entire world is starting to come on to this thing, and yet, it's still being suppressed information-wise in this country, and the whole
Well, I've always felt that when the whole world was free and enlightened, that probably the United States would be the last bastion of constipation and crypto-fascism on the planet.
I think you're right, bro.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing that we stick with it.
And that's the other thing, is that throughout time, against all opposition to do otherwise, there has been a certain faction of people on this planet that have continued to keep this seed alive.
That's
and
right.
over the centuries, over millennium, and continue to use it against all opposition to do otherwise.
Well, it's a phenomenon of the margin. And, in the United States, it was black people in the 20s and so forth. It retreats to the margin in eras when social control becomes totally autocratic, and then in periods of social confusion or plurality, it can make an emergence. But whether it will ever, in the United States, be legal to just twist one up and go for it, I just don't know, because to me it is so inexorably linked to political dissent. And you just don't hear this said much on either side.
No, it's like if you really want to know what's going on in an office, listen to what they're not talking about.
That's right. But there seems to be an agreement on the part of the hemp proponents and the hemp opponents not to discuss the actual social impact of what it would mean to let people relax, for God's sake. And a drug like Prozac, patented and owned by drug companies,
happy drugs,
is in a sense being marketed, I think, as a cannabis substitute that
I have to agree.
Controllable by the pharmaceutical people.
Also, I think one thing I found about it is it teaches people to share. In fact, in all of the people in the hemp community that I deal with, we end up, bartering things and sharing food, and very communal type lifestyle follows this around also, tribal lifestyle.
Well, like all hallucinogens or psychedelics, it tends to dissolve boundaries. And so the idea of me and mine is not quite so strong. And then we let our hair down a little and we can share food and who knows what else if we were to explore it. I think it's wonderful. I think, in a sense, it's the first step toward curing our dis-ease with civilization. I wrote a book called The Archaic Revival that was basically about trying to turn people toward shamanistic lifestyles, especially lifestyles based on relationships to plants. And cannabis is right up there.
Terence, we're in the last day of a fundraiser here at KPFK, and we'd like you to maybe tell the listeners why you think it's important that they support this radio station in bringing them this information.
Oh, I'd be happy to say why I think Pacifica Radio is important. I started listening to Pacifica when I came to Los Angeles, to the Mojave Desert in 1965, and I've stuck with it. When I lived in Northern California, I listened to the Berkeley station, and over all that time, 65, 75, 85, 95, 30 years, consistently, Pacifica Radio has been the best source of information of a countercultural and critical sort. And that's speaking through the Vietnam War, through the Nixon years, through Watergate, Carter, all of that. I just think I can't say enough good things about KPFK and the people who run it. It's one of the last beacons of freedom in a progressively more fascistic and constipated country.
Right on.
Yeah. Well, Terence, we're going to let you go so we don't run up your phone bill too much. And we want to thank you so much for coming on and helping us raise money for KPFK, because we do have to keep it going in order to keep bringing out this kind of information.
Well, I hope it wasn't too crackly, and anytime I can help out, why, just send me email or let me know.
Do you want to give out your email number?
I'd love to give out, not my email number, but let me give out my website address.
Great.
I'd love to have people visit my website.
Okay.
It's http://www.levity.com/eschaton. ESCHATON/. And I won't repeat it. We'll just hope people are really on the ball. Anyway, you can find it by searching Terence McKenna in Lycos. I love talking to you. I hope that the politics of cannabis continue to blossom, and in spite of my own skepticism, I'd love to see a world where we could all grow our food, get high, stop cutting the forest, and live in community.
Thank you so much, Terence.
Okie doke. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This reading is from The Hashish Eater, or Passages from the Life of a Pythagorean, by Fitzhugh Ludlow, published in 1857 by Harper and Brothers, New York. This was the first of the American hashish exposés, and many feel the best. And what I'm going to read this morning, out of a very rich potential group of readings, is Fitzhugh Ludlow's description of his first encounter with the power of cannabis. So I begin the reading partway through the chapter called The Night Entrance.
One morning, in the spring of 1850-something, I dropped in upon the doctor for my accustomed lounge. "Have you seen," said he, "my new acquisitions?" I looked toward the shelves in the direction of which he pointed, and saw, added since my last visit, a row of comely pasteboard cylinders enclosing vials of the various extracts prepared by Tilden and Company. Arranged in order according to their size, they confronted me as pretty a rank of medicinal sharpshooters as could gratify the eye of an amateur. I approached the shelves that I might take them in review. A rapid glance showed most of them to be old acquaintances. Conium taraxacum, rhubarb. Ha! What is this? Cannabis indica? That, answered the doctor, looking with a parental fondness upon his new treasure, is a preparation of the East Indian hemp, a powerful agent in cases of lockjaw. On the strength of this introduction, I took down the little archer and, removing his outer verdant coat, began the further prosecution of his acquaintance. To pull out a broad and shallow cork was the work of an instant, and it revealed to me an olive-brown extract of the consistency of pitch and a decided aromatic odor. Drawing out a small portion upon the point of my penknife, I was just going to put it to my tongue when, "Hold on," cried the doctor. "Do you want to kill yourself? That stuff is deadly poison." "Indeed," I replied, "no, I cannot say that I have any settled determination of that kind." And with that I replaced the cork and restored the extract with all its appurtenances to the shelf. The remainder of my morning's visit in the sanctum was spent consulting the dispensatory under the title Cannabis Indica. The sum of my discoveries there may be found, with much additional information, in that invaluable popular work, Johnston's Chemistry of Common Life. This being universally accessible, I will allude no further to the result of that morning's researches than to mention the three following conclusions to which I came. First, the doctor was both right and wrong. Right, inasmuch as a sufficiently large dose of the drug, if it could be retained in the stomach, would produce death, like any other narcotic, and the ultimate effect of its habitual use had always proved highly injurious to mind and body. Wrong, since moderate doses of it were never immediately deadly, and many millions of people daily employed it as an indulgence similarly to opium. Second, it was the hashish referred to by Eastern travelers and the subject of a most graphic chapter from the pen of Bayard Taylor, which months before had moved me powerfully to curiosity and admiration. Third, I would add it to the list of my former experiences. In pursuance of this last determination, I waited till my friend was out of sight, that I might not terrify him by that which he considered a suicidal venture, and then, quickly uncapping my little archer a second time, removed from his store of offensive armor a pill sufficient to balance the 10-grain weight of the sanctorial scales. This, upon the authority of Pereira and the dispensatory, I swallowed without a tremor as to the danger of the result. Making all due allowance for the fact that I had not taken my hashish bolus fasting, I ought to experience its effects within the next 4 hours. That time elapsed without bringing the shadow of a phenomenon. It was plain that my dose had been insufficient. For the sake of observing the most conservative prudence, I suffered several days to go by without a repetition of the experiment, and then, keeping the matter equally secret, I administered to myself a pill of 15 grains. This second was equally ineffectual with the first. Gradually, by 5 grains at a time, I increased the dose to 30 grains, which I took one evening half an hour after tea. I had now almost come to the conclusion that I was absolutely unsusceptible of the hashish influence, without any expectation that this last experiment would be more successful than the former ones, and indeed with no realization of the manner in which the drug affected those who did make the experiment successfully, I went to pass the evening at the house of an intimate friend. In music and conversation, the time passed pleasantly. The clock struck 10, reminding me that 3 hours had elapsed since the dose was taken, and as yet not an unusual symptom had appeared. I was provoked to think that this trial was as fruitless as its predecessors. Ah, what means this sudden thrill? A shock, as of some unimagined vital force, shoots without warning through my entire frame, leaping to my fingers' ends, piercing my brain, startling me till I almost spring from my chair. I could not doubt it. I was in the power of the hashish influence. My first emotion was one of uncontrollable terror, a sense of getting something which I had not bargained for. That moment I would have given all I had or hoped to have to be as I was 3 hours before. No pain anywhere, not a twinge in any fiber, yet a cloud of unutterable strangeness was settling upon me and wrapping me impenetrably in from all that was natural or familiar. Endeared faces well known to me of old surrounded me, and yet they were not with me in my loneliness. I had entered upon a tremendous life which they could not share. If the disembodied ever return to hover over the hearthstone which once had a seat for them, they look upon their friends as I then looked upon mine. A nearness of place with an infinite distance of state, a connection which had no possible sympathies for the wants of that hour of revelation, an isolation none the less perfect for seeming companionship. Still, I spoke. A question was put to me, and I answered it. I even laughed at a bon mot. Yet it was not my voice which spoke, perhaps one which I once had far away in another time and another place. For a while I knew nothing that was going on externally, and then the remembrance of the last remark which had been made returned slowly and indistinctly, as some trait of a dream will return after many days, puzzling us to say where we have been conscious of it before. A fitful wind all the evening had been sighing down the chimney. Now it grew into the steady hum of a vast wheel in accelerating motion. For a while this hum seemed to resound through all space. I was stunned by it. I was absorbed in it. Slowly the revolution of the wheel came to a stop, and its monotonous din was changed for the reverberating peal of a grand cathedral organ. The ebb and flow of its inconceivably solemn tone filled me with a grief that was more than human. I sympathized with the dirge-like cadence as spirit sympathizes with spirit, and then, in the full conviction that all I heard and felt was real, I looked out of my isolation to see the effect of the music on my friends. Ah, we were in separate worlds indeed, not a trace of appreciation on any face. Perhaps I was acting strangely. Suddenly a pair of busy hands, which had been running neck and neck all the evening with a nimble little crochet needle over a race ground of pink and blue silk, stopped at their goal, and their owner looked at me steadfastly. Ah, I was found out. I had betrayed myself. In terror I waited, expecting every instant to hear the word hashish. No, the lady only asked me some question connected with the previous conversation. As mechanically as an automaton, I began to reply. As I heard once more the alien and unreal tones of my own voice, I became convinced that it was someone else who spoke, and in another world. I sat and listened. Still the voice kept speaking. Now, for the first time, I experienced the vast change which hashish makes in all measurements of time. The first word of the reply occupied a period sufficient for the action of a drama. The last left me in complete ignorance of any point far enough back in the past to date the commencement of the sentence. Its enunciation might have occupied years. I was not in the same life which had held me when I heard it begun. And now, with time, space expanded also. At my friend's house, one particular armchair was always reserved for me. I was sitting in it at a distance of hardly 3 feet from the center table around which the members of the family were grouped. Rapidly, that distance widened. The whole atmosphere seemed ductile and spun endlessly out into great spaces surrounding me on every side. We were in a vast hall of which my friends and I occupied opposite extremities. The ceiling and the walls ran upward with a gliding motion as if vivified by a sudden force of resistless growth. Oh, I could not bear it. I should soon be left alone in the midst of an infinity of space, and now more and more every moment increased the conviction that I was watched. I did not know then, as I learned afterwards, that suspicion of all earthly things and persons was the characteristic of the hashish delirium. In the midst of my complicated hallucination, I could perceive that I had a dual existence. One portion of me was whirled unresistingly along the track of this tremendous experience. The other sat looking down from a height upon its double, observing, reasoning, and serenely weighing all the phenomena. This calmer being suffered with the other by sympathy, but did not lose its self-possession. Presently it warned me that I must go home, lest the growing effect of the hashish should incite me to some act which might frighten my friends. I acknowledged the force of this remark very much as if it had been made by another person, and rose to take my leave. I advanced toward the center table. With every step its distance increased. I nerved myself as for a long pedestrian journey. Still the lights, the faces, the furniture receded. At last, almost unconsciously, I reached them. It would be tedious to attempt to convey the idea of the time which my leave-taking consumed, and the attempt, at least with all minds that have not passed through the same experience, it would be as impossible as tedious. At last, however, I was in the street. Beyond me the view stretched endlessly away. It was an unconverging vista whose nearest lamps seemed separated from me by leagues. I was doomed to pass through a merciless stretch of space, a soul just disenthralled, setting out for his flight beyond the furthest visible star, could not be more overwhelmed with his newly acquired conception of the sublimity of distance than I was at that moment. Solemnly, I began my infinite journey. Before long, I walked in entire unconsciousness of all around me. I dwelt in a marvelous inner world. I existed by turns in different places and various states of being. Now I swept my gondola through the moonlit lagoons of Venice. Now Alp on Alp towered above my view, and the glory of the coming sun flashed purple light upon the topmost icy pinnacle. Now, in the primeval silence of some unexplored tropical forest, I spread my feathery leaves, a giant fern, and swayed and nodded in the spice gales over a river whose waves at once sent up clouds of music and perfume. My soul changed to a vegetable essence, thrilled with a strange and unimaginable ecstasy. The palace of Al-Harum could not have brought me back to humanity. I will not detail all the transmutations of that walk. Ever and anon I returned from my dreams into consciousness as some well-known house seemed to leap out into my path, awakening me with a shock. The whole way homeward was a series of such awakenings and relapses into abstraction and delirium until I reached the corner of the street in which I lived. Here, a new phenomenon manifested itself. I had just awakened for perhaps the 20th time, and my eyes were wide open. I recognized all surrounding objects and began calculating the distance home. Suddenly, out of a blank wall at my side, a muffled figure stepped into the path before me. his hair, white as snow, hung in tangled elf locks on his shoulders, where he carried also a heavy burden, like unto the well-filled sack of sins which Bunyan places on the back of his pilgrim. Not liking his manner, I stepped aside, intending to pass around him and go on my way. This change of our relative position allowed the blaze of a neighboring streetlight to fall full on his face, which had hitherto been totally obscured. Horror unspeakable! I shall never, till the day I die, forget that face. Every lineament was stamped with the records of a life black with damning crime. It glared upon me with a ferocious wickedness and a stony despair which only he may feel who is entering on the retribution of the unpardonable sin. He might have sat to a demon painter as the ideal of Shelley's Cenci. I seemed to grow blasphemous in looking at him, and, in an agony of fear, began to run away. He detained me with a bony hand which pierced my wrist like talons, and slowly taking down the burden from his own shoulders, laid it upon mine. I threw it off and pushed him away. Silently he returned and restored the weight. Again I repulsed him, this time crying out, "Man, what do you mean?"
What do you mean?
In a voice which impressed me with the sense of wickedness as his face had done, he replied, "You shall bear my burden with me," and a third time laid it on my shoulders. For the last time I hurled it aside and, with all my force, dashed him from me. He reeled backward and fell, and before he could recover his disadvantage, I had put a long distance between us. Through the excitement of my struggle with this phantasm, the effects of the hashish had increased mightily. I was bursting with an uncontrollable life. I strode with the thews of a giant. Hotter and faster came my breath. I seemed to pant like some tremendous engine. An electric energy whirled me resistlessly onward. I feared for myself lest it should burst its fleshy walls and glance on, leave a wrecked framework behind it. At last, I entered my own house. During my absence, a family connection had arrived from abroad and stood ready to receive my greeting. Partly restored to consciousness by the naturalness of home faces and the powerful light of a chandelier which shed its blaze through the room, I saw the necessity of vigilance against betraying my condition, and, with an intense effort suppressing all I felt, I approached my friend and said all that is usual on such occasions. Yet, recent as I was from my conflict with the supernatural, I cast a stealthy look about me that I might learn from the faces of others if, after all, I was shaking hands with a phantom and making inquiries about the health of a family of hallucinations. Growing assured, as I perceived no symptoms of astonishment, I finished the salutation and sat down. It soon required all my resolution to keep the secret which I had determined to hold inviolable. My sensations began to be terrific, not from any pain that I felt, but from the tremendous mystery of all around me and within me. By an appalling introversion, all the operations of vitality, which in our ordinary state go on unconsciously, came vividly into my experience. Through every thinnest corporeal tissue and minutest vein, I could see the circulation of the blood along each inch of its progress. I knew when every valve opened and when it shut. Every sense was preternaturally awakened. The room was full of a great glory. The beating of my heart was so clearly audible that I wondered to find it unnoticed by those who were sitting by my side. Lo, now the heart became a great fountain whose jet played upward with loud vibrations, and a striking upon the roof of my skull as on a gigantic dome, fell back with a splash and echo into its reservoir. Faster and faster came the pulsations, until at last I heard them no more, and the stream became one continuously pouring flood, whose roar resounded through all my frame. I gave myself up for lost, since judgment, which still sat unimpaired above my perverted senses, argued that congestion must take place in a few moments and close the drama with my death. But my clutch would not yet relax from hope. The thought struck me, might not this rapidity of circulation be, after all, imaginary? I determined to find out. Going to my own room, I took out my watch and placed my hand upon my heart. The very effort which I made to ascertain the reality gradually brought perception back to its normal state. In the intensity of my observations, I began to perceive that the circulation was not as rapid as I had thought. From a pulseless flow, it gradually came to be apprehended as a hurrying succession of intense throbs, then less swift and less intense, till finally, on comparing it with the second hand, I found that about 90 a minute was its average rapidity. Greatly comforted, I desisted from the experiment. Almost instantly the hallucination returned. Again I dreaded apoplexy, congestion, hemorrhage, and a multiplicity of nameless deaths, and drew my picture as I might be found on the morrow, stark and cold, by those whose agony would be redoubted by the mystery of my end. I reasoned with myself. I bathed my forehead. It did no good. There was one resource left. I would go to a physician. With this resolve, I left my room and went to the head of the staircase. The family had all retired for the night, and the gas was turned off from the burner in the hall below. I looked down the stairs. The depth was fathomless. It was a journey of years to reach the bottom. The dim light of the sky shone through the narrow panes at the sides of the front door and seemed a demon light in the middle darkness of the abyss. I never could get down. I sat me down despairingly upon the topmost step. Suddenly a sublime thought possessed me. If the distance be infinite, I am immortal. It shall be tried. I commenced the descent wearily down through my league-long, year-long journey. To record my impressions in that journey would be to repeat what I have said of the time of hashish. Now stopping to rest as a traveler would turn aside at a wayside inn, now toiling down through the lonely darkness, I came by and by to the end and passed out into the street.
Hash smokers are greatly favored in this endeavor because you really need leather lungs for this. The great problem is that people will cough or not be able to hold it in. You take 2 hits in a situation where your clothes have been loosened and you can just flop backward when you need to. You take 2 hits. Now, many people miss the point, because after 2 hits, you feel completely peculiar. You feel as though your body is undergoing some strange kind of anesthesia. All the air has been pumped out of the room. This is the visual acuity thing I talked about last night. The colors jump up. The edges sharpen. And at that point, people say, whoa, wow, it's really coming on strong. And then what you have to do is you have to take one more enormous hit. And this separates the intrepid from the casual, believe me. Because most people, and the facilitator doesn't want to lean on the person. You say, damn it, take the 3rd hit. And saying, no, I feel completely weird. Say, I know you feel weird, but take the 3rd hit. Well, if you can coax somebody into that, then what happens is you close your eyes and you see the ordinary warm brown back, closed eyelid scenario. And then these colors begin racing together. And it forms this mandalic, floral, slowly rotating thing, which I call the chrysanthemum. This is a place in the trip that you want to see as you go by it. The chrysanthemum forms, and you watch it for like 15 seconds. If it doesn't give way, then you didn't do enough. You have to do more. One more hit usually will do it. Well, then what happens is it like physically propels you through this chrysanthemum-like thing, and there's a sound like a saran wrap bread wrapper being crumpled up and thrown away, that crackle. A friend of mine says, this is your radio intellecty leaving through the anterior fontanelle at the top of your head. I don't know what it is, but something is being... Yeah, right, that's what it is. And then there's this very defined sense of bursting through something, a membrane. And on the other side, and this is now, remember, my experience, on the other side, as you break through, there's a cheer. There's a whole bunch of entities waiting on the other side. And they, that Pink Floyd song, The Gnomes Have Learned a New Way to Say Hooray. Well, it's that place. It's those gnomes. And you burst into this space, and they're saying, how wonderful that you're here. You come so rarely. We're so delighted to see you. And one of the things about DMT that's really puzzling is, in a sense, it doesn't affect your mind. In other words, you don't change. For instance, if you take ketamine, the very first thing you notice before the trip hits is you notice that you no longer are anxious about having taken ketamine. You just sort of, anxiety leaves you. That means it's affecting your mind. It's doing something to the judgmental machinery. DMT doesn't lay a hand on the judgmental machinery. You break through into that space exactly who you were before breaking through. And the usual reaction of most people is something like, and you think, God, heartbeat, normal. Pulse, normal. Everything's normal. Yeah, everything's normal. Oh, God. Because these things are there, and they're hammering at you, and they come forward. They're like jeweled, self-dribbling basketballs. And there are many of them, and they come pounding toward you, and they will stop in front of you and vibrate, but then they do a very disconcerting thing, which is they jump into your body. They jump into your body, and then they jump back out again. And the whole thing is going on in this very high-speed mode where you're being presented with thousands of details per second, and you can't get a hold on, you say, my God, what's happening? And these things are saying, don't abandon yourself to amazement, which is exactly what you want to do. You just want to go nuts with how crazy this is. They say, don't do that. Don't do that. Pay attention. Pay attention to what we're doing. Well, what are they doing? Well, what they're doing is they're making objects with their voices. They're singing structures into existence. These things are, and what they will do is they'll come toward you, and you have to understand, they don't have arms, so we're kind of downloading this into a lower dimension to even describe it. But what they do is they offer things to you. Say, look at this. Look at this. And as your attention goes toward these objects, you realize that what you're being shown is impossible. It's impossible. It's not simply intricate, beautiful, and hard to manufacture. It's impossible to make these things. The nearest analogy would be to the Fabergé eggs, or something like that. But these things are like the toys that are scattered around the nursery inside a UFO or something. Celestial toys. And the toys themselves appear to be somehow alive. The toys themselves can sing other objects into existence. So what's happening is there's just this proliferation of elf gifts.
And the elf gifts are moving around, singing, and the whole thing is directed toward, they're saying, do what we are doing. And they're very insistent. They say, do it, do it, do it. And you feel like a bubble. And now this is subjective. I mean, only 5% report this, but it happens to me. You feel like some kind of bubble inside your body that's beginning to move up toward your mouth. And when it comes out, it isn't sound, it's vision. You discover that you can pump stuff out of your mouth by singing, and they're urging you to do this. They say, that's it, keep doing it. And the whole thing is like, we're now at minute 4.5 with this stuff. And you speak in a kind of glossolalia. There's a spontaneous outpouring of syntax unaccompanied by what is normally called meaning. It's sort of, he ding wow wak saptivi muldektipi tinget wahaksiki pipinem wahavedektam bohagagetek. And this is accompanied by a modality, something seen. And they're saying, yes, do it, do it, do it. And then after a minute or so of this, the whole thing begins to collapse in on itself. And they literally begin to physically move away from you. And usually their final shot is they actually wave goodbye and they say, déjà vu, déjà vu, which makes no sense at all if you analyze it. So then you come down, and you're now at minute 6 to 7, and you come down, and it's like being more loaded than you've ever been. It's like about a 700 mic acid trip, but you embrace it as totally down. You say, I'm totally down. I mean, you look like a termite from Arcturus, and the room is decorated in Amish quilts, but I'm completely back. And then, over a minute or a minute and a half or so, the room just comes right back together. And 4 minutes after that, some people can give no account of it whatsoever. They just say, I don't know. It was the weirdest thing that ever happened to me, and I can't remember it now.
I found that many of your ideas and presentations were very challenging and dangerous to the limits that I felt on my mind, but I don't feel especially terrified sitting across from you talking with you. I don't feel like you're any danger to me.
No, I'm a nice man. That's part of the strategy. I'm the doorkeeper to deep, dark water that everybody explores on their own. I am not a guru. I have no particular axe of my own to grind, or at least not with great vigor. The point to be made here is that psychedelics are not an ideology or a position. They are an experience. And an experience is something that we have very intimately ourselves. So it's not something you can teach people or draw too many general conclusions from. It's an experience, but it's an experience that I feel people should have. And when I see a political system or a set of cultural values that are denying people this experience, then I feel like some kind of human rights abuse is taking place. In principle, there's nothing wrong with drugs coming out of the laboratory, but in fact, we don't have a large body of experience with these things, where if you go to a tribal situation and they are using a plant in a traditional fashion, then you have your medical data which tells you that these plant substances don't cause mental retardation, birth defects, Parkinson's syndrome. In other words, these human populations that have used these things shamanically have tested a number of these substances, and they are among the most powerful of all the psychedelics known, so you're not limiting the depth of your experience by concentrating on the traditional botanically derived substance. Any culture is a kind of hallucination, a kind of self-limiting group assumption about reality, and we all are adapted to living within one or several cultures. What psychedelics do is they address a deeper level of human neurological organization. They reveal the brain and its function unconfined by cultural norms and expectations. And this can be exalting, exhilarating, dizzying, terrifying, depending on the personality and the circumstance. The tension between so-called straight culture and psychedelic culture is a tension over values. Psychedelics challenge the assumptions of any cultural or political system, and that makes them dangerous to every cultural and political system. So if there's anything, a Marxist dictatorship, a high-tech industrial democracy, or a theocracy, they can all get together on one thing, which is psychedelic drugs are a knife poised at the heart of community values. Well, this is just simply nonsense. And then all the reasons brought forth are, in a sense, a red herring. The psychedelics are among the safest substances known for human ingestion, considering the depth of their impact on human mental functioning. The fact that you pick yourself up 6, 7, 8 hours later and go on about your business with an expanded point of view is quite remarkable. People have a right to get stoned. They have a right to think and explore their own minds. This is as intimate a part of their being as their sexuality. And in any culture which mitigates that is clearly afraid of a full and fair and open dialogue about what reality is and what real human values ought to be. I think anybody who takes a number of psychedelic trips will eventually earn their oak leaves. I mean, you can spend difficult evenings. People who dismiss this as recreational drugs or hedonism or escapism absolutely do not know what they're talking about. This can be very challenging and difficult work. That's the ocean kayaking metaphor is more appropriate, I think. Don't think meditation and yoga are the same enterprise as taking psychedelics. They are often sold as the same enterprise, but in fact nobody goes to the ashram with their knees knocking in terror over what is about to sweep over them. On the other hand, if you're taking high doses of psilocybin or DMT, this would be a perfectly reasonable response. All kinds of areas of human knowledge are experiencing exponential growth, and what the future is going to be about is the integrating of these growth surges across the surface of the rising wave of change and knowledge expansion. We're going to see more change in the next 15 years than we've seen in the last 500 years of the evolution of global culture. And it's going to be a challenge and a wild ride, I dare say, for every man, woman, and child on the planet. Those who keep cultural values in place are always interested in mitigating controversy, exploration, and criticism. As I said earlier, all cultures are involved in the culture game, and psychedelics transcend the culture game. And whether you're Hasid in Jerusalem or a Tokyo stockbroker
Islander or an Andaman Islander. If you take psychedelic substances, your cultural values will suddenly be much more relativistically revealed to you. And that is political dynamite. The tension between so-called straight culture and psychedelic culture is a tension over values. Psychedelics challenge the assumptions of any cultural or political system, and that makes them dangerous to every cultural and political system. So if there's anything, a Marxist dictatorship, a high-tech industrial democracy, or a theocracy, they can all get together on one thing, which is psychedelic drugs are a knife poised at the heart of community values. Well, this is just simply nonsense. And then all the reasons brought forth are, in a sense, a red herring. The psychedelics are among the safest substances known for human ingestion, considering the depth of their impact on human mental functioning. The fact that you pick yourself up 6, 7, 8 hours later and go on about your business with an expanded point of view is quite remarkable. If life is not to be experienced, what is it for? It certainly can't be to go each day to the paper box factory and then come home and consume junk television. I'm interested in everything. To my mind, the psychedelic agenda means visiting the most remote parts of the world, reading the most forgotten and obscure literatures, and having the most extreme experiences that one can enjoy safely. And I view taking psychedelic substances in a category with ocean kayaking, rock climbing, hiking the Andean Trail. It's an athletic, challenging undertaking for people who are interested in limits, their own limits and the limits that the world offers them. For one person to seek enlightenment from another is like a grain of sand on the beach to seek enlightenment from another grain of sand. And I think that's a very powerful message. It says we're all human, we're all in this dilemma together, and our levels of accomplishment and knowledge are so similar that there is no reason to assume superiority and to then submit to a guru or a lineage. Not that there are not things to be learned, but I think the richer style of learning is a kind of camaraderie and co-exploration of reality with an open mind. Anybody who claims they have answers is automatically suspect. I mean, where is it writ that talking primates should have perfect models of the universe at large? If you met a termite who told you he was seeking enlightenment, I think it would provoke a small smile. Well, on the galactic scale, the difference between us and that termite is hardly worth mentioning. I look forward to the global transformation of human culture. I think it's been a long, bloody slog from the plains of Africa to the surface of the moon. And the cultural models that we've used are worn out. And transformation is now inevitable. We know that we're at the limits that the planet as a resource can tolerate. We have technologies that could transform the world. We have enormous creative abilities. What we seem to lack is mental discipline. We need to change our minds about issues like class, race, gender, resource extraction. If we do not change our minds, we're going to push this entire planetary system into some state of fibrillation from which it will be very difficult to rescue rescue it and ourselves. So the great challenge is to change our minds. And I know of nothing that does that in the time frames that we have to operate as effectively as psychedelics. If hortatory preaching did it, then we would have turned the corner with the Sermon on the Mount or with the sermon at the Deer Park at Sarnath or something like that. But we need direct neurological intervention at the meat level in order to turn this monkey into a planetary gardener, ecologist, and a caring force in nature and the human world. Bilbo Baggins said it, the greatest adventure still lies ahead, and so let's be up and about it.
Is he the one who said that?
He's one of the ones who said it.
Hey, it's Danit Friedman. If you watched till this far, then I want to say thank you, and I hope you got inspired and have a great day or night.